An 11-year-old in Gainesville taking her own life.
According to her parents, their daughter bullied over immigration.
Welcome to Heart of the Case. My name is Lauren. I am a licensed clinical social worker in Texas. And before we begin, I want to remind you that this podcast covers real life cases that can be heavy and very, very emotional. These are the stories that we honestly need to hear and share with one another, even though they're very, very, very hard to hear and hard to share. The sharing is necessary so that we can learn and work together to improve. I say that as a caveat to just mention to please take care of yourself while you're listening. And as always, if you are finding value in this space, I am so happy. If you're finding value in these conversations, please take a moment to rate and review this podcast, Heart of the Case, hosted by Social Work Scrapbook. I've been known as Social Work Scrapbook because I'm very proud of my origins as a social worker. We're jumping into Social Work Month, which is the month of March, my birthday month. So we have a lot of great new content coming your way in regards to social workers. I really want to join the discussion when it comes to true crime cases. So if you are enjoying this wonderful blend, please rate and review again. It just helps more people find our space and it keeps these important discussions going. So today's episode is very necessary. We're diving into the heartbreaking case of 11-year-old Jocelynn Rojo Carranza. She's a Texas student who died by suicide after being bullied at school. I'm very close to this episode, not only because I am Mexican American, I'm in Texas. It's a conversation that I have to have because of the climate right now surrounding immigration. Jocelynn was bullied in a way that directly targeted her family's immigration status. So this is a very current case, one that we're not hearing too much in the news at all. And so that's why I want to cover it and kind of give you the background today. We're also going to explore what happened and what was missed and how laws like David's Law, which were formulated to aim to prevent tragedies like this, where do these laws fall? If you're a school social worker, school counselor, you know exactly what David's Law is, and we have to unpack that as well. So let's get into it.
In a CNN report, Jocelyn's mother said that her daughter was born here in the U.S. Her parents say that after Jocelyn's death, that's when they were told that she had been seeing the school counselor several times a week.
Jocelynn Rojo Carranza was an 11-year-old student at Gainesville Intermediate School in Texas. Gainesville lies just outside of Dallas, in that vicinity, in that area, because Texas is very huge. I reside in San Antonio, Texas, and so immigration and status of immigration is something that's top of mind to everyone right now, but in particular, Texas is right by the border, as most of us know, and the discussions around immigration, the topic of immigration, puts so many at a very anxious and uncomfortable level. And then we can imagine being an 11-year-old in school. Jocelynn was described as a very kind, very smart student, full of life. But beneath the surface, she was carrying a weight that really no child should ever have to bear. Reports have begun to surface that Jocelynn had been enduring severe bullying at school, with classmates allegedly threatening to call ICE, which is the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, and they were threatening to have her parents deported, instilling fear that she would be left alone. They really wanted Jocelynn to sit in this and told her what's going to happen when you're here by yourself. These threats reportedly began on the school bus and continued onto school grounds. And I think we really just have to stop and think about what climate are we currently living in where this is what children are bullying each other about. To be afraid and fearful that the people who love and care for you could be taken away just because of their immigration status. Her mother, Marbella, said she was unaware of the extent of the bullying that was happening at school. What she did find out, which is way too late, was that Jocelynn had been receiving counseling at school. but no one informed her about these counseling sessions. She wasn't told that her daughter Jocelynn was struggling so deeply. She wasn't aware. The gap in communication is something that we definitely need to talk about. So let's get into the timeline real quick. On February 3rd, 2025, Jocelynn was found unresponsive in her home in Gainesville, Texas, by her mother, Marbella Carranza. Emergency services were called, and Jocelynn was initially taken to a local hospital before being transferred to a children's hospital in Dallas. After 5 days in intensive care, Jocelynn passed away. This was on February 8th, 2025. So let's move into who knew what. What was the school's response? What did the school know? When did they know it? After Jocelyn's death, Gainesville Independent School District released a statement saying that they were unaware of the bullying allegations before she passed away. Dr. Stewart, the district superintendent, claimed that Jocelynn was part of a group focused on developing coping skills, but that there were no formal reports of bullying against her in her student file. Marbella has been speaking out, saying that she wished she had known what her daughter was going through. And I understand this. I would want to know as well. This is part of why this is a social worker's protocol, to make sure everyone is filled in on what is happening with a family's child at school. If you're a parent, you know that being privy to what they're experiencing at school, especially if they're going to be thrown into a counseling group or a counseling sessions, especially just knowing that, you're going to want to help as much as you can at home and reinforce what the counselors or staff are doing at the school. And her mom claims she might have been able to really pull her out of the situation had she known how severe it was getting. That lack of communication is something many, many parents fear. I fear myself. I have 2 children in school. There's a few podcast episodes where we have really dug deep into how being a social worker has changed the way I parent. And that's episode 2 here of Heart of the Case if you want to take a listen. But back to my point that schools having knowledge of a child's struggles, but failing to bring them into a conversation with the parent is ultimately very dangerous. And this is exactly why. If you are a school social worker, this is definitely a student that you would have on your caseload, on your radar, because Jocelynn actually seeked out help herself, which makes this story even more heartbreaking. I can't even begin to imagine how that must feel as an 11-year-old. And when we think about this, this is a 5th grader, a 5th grade student, 5th, 6th grade student having this type of pressure on you at school. For many children developmentally, just simply going to school can invoke anxiety. There is a separation anxiety from being away from home for the first time. And so we are, as a trend, seeing more and more elementary students becoming very triggered by the threat that their parents might not be home when they get home. And this was something that for Jocelynn was being brought up to her consistently from her classmates. So this raises a few critical questions. You might be having them as well. One, if students were making these threats, did anyone report it? Just recalling like back to your school days, if you haven't worked in schools, we know that these threats are said in the classroom. They could be in the hallways, during lunch, during recess, PE, very unstructured times, but typically people overhear it. We're constantly, as school social workers, educating students and even staff about not being an innocent bystander. So really raises that question of, if such threats were being made, why didn't anyone report it? Number 2, if the school had her in the coping skills group, as Dr. Stewart mentioned, did the staff know more than they are acknowledging? Maybe, maybe not. And most importantly, my last question that comes up at this moment is, why wasn't her mother informed even about the group? If you worked with students or around students, you know we need consent to work with students, even for a social skills group. You want to get the parent and the family's buy-in, but also their consent to begin working in groups like this. So some major gaps here for sure. Walkouts have been happening all over Texas, in San Antonio as well, with students hoping to advocate for basic human rights. So, if we want to take anything from this, if you are working with children in any capacity and concerned about them, it's not enough to make a referral to the counselor. Best practice is also to let the family and parent know that this referral is being made. That this is typically a step that is missed by common folk, usually not social workers, usually not counselors, but we're not perfect. So, if anything, this is your reminder to make sure everyone is in alignment here. I know that sometimes parents are busy. They might not answer the phone. They might not text back. They might not listen to the message, but we have to do our due diligence, especially social workers, because of the ethical guidelines that we follow. I digress a bit. If you're a parent or educator, I really want to hear from you. Do you think that schools do enough to keep parents informed about their children's emotional well-being? So that's our poll today, and you can head to the poll that's running on Spotify for just a few weeks or just comment. That's always open, and I love reading through your comments. I definitely do read through these comments because they often challenge me to think even outside of my own realm. So the comment box is there below, and I'd love to just read what your thoughts are on this. I mentioned David's Law in the beginning of this episode, and David's Law is part of anti-bullying policies that have also come out of Texas. So I want to unpack how this can be prevented. So let's discuss what protections exist for students, all students. In Texas, we have David's Law, which was passed in 2017 after another tragic case, the case of David Malek, which if you're interested, that is another case that we can unpack, especially for Bullying Prevention Month that is coming up. Real quickly, though, David was a San Antonio teenager that died by suicide as well after relentless cyberbullying. So in David's Law, schools now, as of 2017, are required to do 4 things. The first is to have an official process for reporting bullying. This sounds super simple, but many schools, many districts, many schools between districts didn't all have a standard protocol for reporting bullying. So now each and every campus must have an official process. They also, number 2, need to notify parents when their child is involved in a bullying incident. I know where your mind is going, and my mind is going there as well. If Jocelynn was being bullied, and I don't even want to say if, I'm sure she was being bullied, why weren't the parents notified? It's 2025. Being a school social worker, we get trained every year. This is part of annual training on David's Law, cyberbullying, reporting bullying, notifying parents right away. Another part of David's Law, part 3, is that schools and campuses have to investigate reports of bullying and take action if necessary. The investigation is very long, very thorough. It's typically done by an administrator. And lastly, the 4th thing that the law requires Texas schools to do is to provide resources and intervention strategies for students who were a victim of bullying. Perhaps that's what these social skills groups were about. I'm not sure. I do not know. But here's the issue. While David's Law mandates notification, the enforcement of David's Law is very inconsistent. In Jocelyn's case, it seems like multiple systems at different levels failed this child. If the threats from classmates were ongoing, why weren't there stronger interventions? If she was in counseling, why weren't her parents notified? Schools are supposed to be a safe place, but for some kids, they become the source of their greatest anxiety. And this is the very reason why I feel Jocelynn would have been a referral to a school social worker, school counselor. Even if she had not reached out for help herself, we would have seen this anxiety building. This case is a reminder that laws only work when they are properly enforced, and schools must be held accountable when they fail to act. If you're listening and wondering how you can help advocating for stronger enforcement of David's Law and ensuring that schools are transparent with parents is the best place to start. Now, beyond the school, beyond that scope, let's pull back into immigration policy and its role in bullying. We can't talk about Jocelyn's case without addressing how immigration status is being weaponized in bullying. This is the climate that we are all a part of, like it or not. This isn't just about name calling. This is about threats that strike at the heart of a child's security. Immigration policies in the United States are constantly shifting. They've been a huge topic of conversation. I don't think you can open your phone or turn on the TV without hearing about ICE and immigration. And when kids internalize this political rhetoric, they use it against their peers. So another way to help is if you have any contact with kids, with your own kids yourself, it's very important to teach our children how to empathize. The fear of family separation is real. And when the fear is used as a weapon by a bully, it can be devastating. Jocelyn's case is not the first where a child took their own life after being targeted in this particular way. And unless real change happens, it won't be the last. This change can happen at home. It just starts with a conversation. I know these are tough conversations to have. It's tough to even share Jocelyn's case. And you don't have to go through the whole timeline with your child, but it's very important to mention that immigration, this talk about ICE, these walkouts, have a conversation around simply being humane and empathizing with what people are going through. Whether you are an immigrant or not, whether you're in Texas or not, it's about starting conversations about knowing how these laws impact people in a very real way and how we're no better than anyone else just by our status. A lot of what our kids might be stating back to us may be shocking, and we need to give them a space to share their own ideas and their own opinions and then scaffold those, because keep in mind that their opinions right now and their ideas are largely shaped, as are our own, by the rhetoric that's happening online, in TV, in the media. It shapes it whether we like it or not. And it's really our role as parents, as, you know, if you work in a school, in a system, it's our role to make sure that just basic human empathy, we don't have to even get into politics at all, or what's right and what's wrong, or criminal status or not, or we don't have to even get into those weeds, other than the fact that, hey, this is happening and real people are impacted. We have to empathize with, even if someone is a criminal or broke the law by coming here illegally and committing crimes, they still have a family that cares for them, that really wishes they weren't doing such things. These are all conversations that definitely should be happening and starting at home. And I can go into a whole nother episode where I share my conversation that I've had with my own kids. I have a 10-year-old and a 15-year-old, and this is something that's hard to talk about. We take it in chunks for sure, because it's so much, even for me. After a long day's work, it's not something I look forward to diving into these conversations, but they have to be had. Reading the headline, diving into the story is very tough. This was a tough episode for sure. And I want to thank you for sticking with me all the way through it. Jocelyn's story is heartbreaking, but it's also a wake-up call. Schools need to do better. Laws need to be enforced. And as a community, we need to support families like Jocelyn's before it's too late. Don't be an innocent bystander. Next time on Heart of the Case, I'm switching gears a little bit, and I'll be sharing my personal journey into social work. It will be Social Work Month. I'm also going to include some life updates, because there's some major updates I can't wait to share with y'all, and y'all will be the first to hear this news. And I also want to share why cases like this hit so close to home for me. So if you're ever wondered what made me step into this field of social work, I know most social workers kind of wonder, about each other in our communities. Like, how did you jump into this these deep, deep waters. So I hope you tune in. In the meantime, please, if you haven't already, take that moment to rate and review this podcast. It's one small way to make sure more people hear stories like Jocelyn's. And if you want to be part of the conversation, don't forget to head over to the poll or to leave a comment down below. I can't wait to read those. Thank you again for listening. Take care, hold your loved ones close, and I'll see you next time on Heart of the Case.